In this video, you will be learning how to use the hard slab construction technique. Before you start, you will need a prism's net in the size and shape of your choice. You'll need to create a slab that's 1/2 inch in thickness and wide enough to cover the area of your net. To create your slab, you can use the slab throwing technique. Lift your clay from the end furthest away from you and then throw the bottom of the clay against the table going in the direction towards you. As the furthest end of your clay sticks against the table, the remainder of your clay stretches thinner and wider into a slab. Keep checking to see if your clay slab is wide enough to fit your net. I like going over my slab one last time with a rolling pin, just in case there are some uneven bumps in my clay. Next, compress both sides with a metal rip tool. Smooth out your clay going from top to bottom, then left to right. Then flip your clay over and do the same thing on the other side. Compressing your slabs greatly contribute to the integrity of your clay, not only by smoothing out the surface, but by compacting the particles of clay together to make them stronger. Now place your slab on a flat porous surface, such as a piece of cardboard, a wooden cutting board, or a surface covered by newspaper. Place your net on top of the slab and cut along the perimeter. All of the excess clay removed from around the perimeter of your net can be wedged and used later. Once you've cut out the perimeter of your net on the slab, fold your paper net alongside each of the interior lines. Place your paper net back on the slab, folding each interior line at a time and gently tracing alongside each line with your needle tool. Now you can remove the paper net and comfortably use your needle tool to slice away each of the traced lines. When cutting into your clay slabs, remember to hold your needle tool at a 90-degree angle, perpendicular to the slab. After you've cut along all interior lines, place your clay into a plastic bag. The porosity of the cardboard will slowly soak up water content from the clay itself, causing your clay to enter the leather hard stage. This may take a day or two, so I would recommend checking your clay at least once a day. You'll know your clay is at the right stage when you still feel some water content, but the slab no longer bends. Now you're going to use your trimming tools to trim alongside each of the walls of each of your individual slabs at a 45-degree angle. If you look at your slab from the side, you'll be able to tell if you've shaved away at the correct angle. A properly trimmed edge shouldn't have any flat sections, but should create a pointed edge. Also, don't forget to trim down to the corners. Take your time with the corners as they are more fragile. You can use your thumb as support to prevent yourself from cutting into a corner. If you forget how your pieces were placed on the net, you can use your paper net to arrange them correctly. You can also experiment with the type of trimming tools you use for your own comfort as you start learning to use this technique. As you trim down the edges, you'll notice a whole bunch of scraps being formed. You can hold on to those scraps and turn them into slip. Sometimes you might trim away too much at the corners. Don't worry about that, because we can fix it when we're constructing. But if you accidentally trim away more than 1/4 of an inch or break a piece in half, you'll have to recreate that piece by going through the entire slab making process from the beginning. Once you've got all of your pieces trimmed down, it's time to score alongside each of the edges. I find that shaving down all the edges at once and then scoring down all the edges at once makes it easier for when you start constructing your form. This way, if you're going to take a break between the prep of these slabs and the construction, you'll have all the pieces ready to go for when you return. Now that each piece has been scored, it's time to construct. You want to be strategic with how you construct your pieces. Sometimes you'll want to work from center out, sometimes from left to right. I like starting with the largest piece first. For this project, you're going to need a generous amount of slip. Don't worry about using up all your slip, because you can always make more with the scraps you created earlier. Add a generous amount of slip to one side and then combine the pieces together. Align and press the corners together and wipe away the excess slip. If you created your net properly, all the pieces should align perfectly. Now it's time to reinforce your form from the interior. Grab some plastic clay and roll it up into coils, approximately the thickness of your needle tool. Dip your coil in a cup of water and place it alongside the inner corner of your form. While you press the coil into the corner, use your hand from the outside as support to prevent the wall from falling back. Now use a wooden thumb tool to smooth out the coil into the walls of your form. If you have excess clay from the coil alongside the scored edges, remove it with a needle tool. Continue attaching and reinforcing one wall at a time. If you have negative spaces on the exterior of your form, from where you accidentally trimmed away too much, grab some soft clay and patch it up. Then use the flat side of your wooden thumb tool to smooth out that corner. Now if you get to a piece that doesn't quite fit perfectly, you'll need to adjust the angles of the walls by gently moving them further or closer together. This sometimes happens when slabs are attached at too wide or too narrow of angles. But if you trust that your net was made properly, a few bends here and there will allow for your form to adjust to that piece. As you get to your last few pieces, you'll notice that it will become more and more difficult to reinforce from the interior. This is because as the form starts to close, you have a smaller area to reach in and reinforce. At this point, you may have to work with the coils blindly to reinforce the interiors, which means you won't be able to see what you're doing. For your last piece, since you won't be able to reach in there and reinforce it from the interior, we're going to use twice as much slip. You'll be adding slip to the scored areas of your main form, as well as to the scored areas on your last piece. As the generous amount of slip from the interior dries, it will bind the pieces together. Firmly press alongside each of those corners and remove the excess slip. Now do one final inspection alongside the exterior of your form and patch up any negative spaces. The last and perhaps the most important step will be to add a vent hole to the bottom of your form. Before you decide what the bottom of your form will be, tilt your form around and experiment with interesting angles at which your form will stand. Once you've figured out the most interesting angle at which your form sits, it's time to add the vent hole. First, use the needle tool to create an opening at the bottom of your form. Then use the rounded side of your narrow trimming tool to drill a much neater vent hole. This hole is not a decorative shallow hole on the surface of your form. It should go all the way through to the air pocket in the center of your form, allowing residual water content to escape while your form is getting fired. Approximately 24 hours after construction, with your form covered with a plastic bag, the corners of your form should be at the same leather-hard consistency as the walls. At this stage, you can use your trimming tools to trim alongside the edges of your form, creating crisp, sharp edges. This is also a great time to give your form one final inspection, filling in any dents and negative spaces you find with soft clay.